Hello friends, welcome back. Today's picture panel is a view in the beautiful Humber. So this is actually part two. I already did one talking about this bridge and the town that exists around it, so check that out if you haven't seen it yet. But this one really works on its own. So the only thing that there is to go off of in this photo is a truss bridge in the background, which frankly isn't a lot. There are a lot of truss bridges along this river, and almost all of them are gone now. And the overwhelming majority of them all got up and left right around the same year, 1954. I was filming this on October 15th and 16th, which is actually 66 years before Hurricane Hazel ripped through the area and changed things quite a bit along this river. Toronto doesn't really get a lot of tropical storms. They usually just kind of travel along the coast and dither out before they'll make it anywhere in here. Maybe some rain or something will come. But in 1954, Hurricane Hazel made a straight beeline for Toronto, and that was something that nobody was ready for at the time. And what they really weren't ready for was that when it went over Lake Ontario, it sucked up a ton of cold water and just stalled right over the city and dumped water on the city for about 2 days straight. And in particular, during one 3-hour flash flood, waters rose in some areas by as much as 8 meters, which means that for a storm people were preparing for 8 inches of rain for, that this ended up washing out 50 plus bridges, an entire railway, big chunks of highway, a third of a kilometer chunk of a subdivision with 14 houses with everybody still hiding inside, all got washed out in this big flash flood that nobody was expecting. The Humber ended up being where most of the water drained as it was heading out. And that means that anything that was built alongside the banks of the Humber got ruined in that storm. And as a result of that storm, they have really changed the entire landscape around the Humber to try to accommodate flash floods like this that will happen again in the future. And they've also, beefed up the banks, and that's a big part of why everything still looks roughly the same, actually, is they've made a very conscious effort to renaturalize the area because they know that it's not a smart idea to build things there. So knowing that the banks of the river were going to look quite different as a result of this flooding, I was pretty open to the idea that I wouldn't be able to find all of the exact same geometry and features. So when we got to the area that we thought this was, which was Scarlet Road at first, because it does have an old truss bridge like this, when I couldn't find things like this little footpath or weir or something in the foreground, I was pretty okay with the idea that that had just been washed out long ago and not maintained. And I managed to find an area that actually looked remarkably similar to me, and I was pretty convinced that I found the right area. Something else that was really cool that was happening at the same time was salmon were actually in the process of spawning, which is something that I had actually never seen before, so that was kind of special for me. So after I'd gotten home and started writing up my script about how the area still looks quite similar, except maybe there are more trees because it's been renaturalized, Rick sent me an email saying that we got it all wrong. I wasn't really sure at first what he was referencing. However, he had done a little more sleuthing about the bridge. The date on the Scarlet Road Bridge didn't line up with Hurricane Hazel, and his own sort of theory about the laziness of photographers not wanting to walk very far while taking different shots meant that he actually thought that this was the old Dundas Street Bridge. Where Dundas Street is with these big arches has never had a truss bridge before, and just the geography around it doesn't really look the same as what was in this photo. However, there used to be an old Dundas Street before one of these straightening projects, like I mentioned earlier on Bloor Street. And that used to actually have an old truss bridge. We can still see the footings on one side of the river here, so the street used to come down these stairs and sort of continue across the truss bridge that we see in this photo. And this is where that would have been. Today it's just a footpath, and you can't really make out where the other end of the bridge would have been. This bridge did wash out during Hurricane Hazel, which is why the new one was built right after Hurricane Hazel. So once you get over to the other side, you can walk down into Homesmith Park, a familiar name to me at this point, and see the exact view that I think this photo was taken from. It too is obviously a lot more grown up as we now sort of think parks should look today. Even though this was shot a week later, the salmon were still spawning actually. It was even late the first time that I'd gone, so it was kind of cool to see them. There was even a man trying to fish and catch a couple of them, but I don't think he was very successful. I think the fish were busy not wanting to eat. I was going to make this video about Hurricane Hazel and all of the impacts that it's had on the city, but they're too numerous. The hurricane really had a much bigger impact than I think I know. I had heard it before, but I didn't really know about exactly what it did change, but it changed pretty much everything about the way that Toronto looks. It's a big part of why our waterfront is only being developed now. The entire Portland's restoration project is inspired by a lot of this. The creation of the Conservation Authority, it's the reason the international airport is where it is. There is just so much going on that I could not shoehorn any of it into this video. So what I will say is when you're going along the Humber and you see these old footings where bridges used to be, that's almost certainly one of the 50 bridges that were washed out by this thing. And when you see a lot of concrete walls along the sides of the river, that's what's going on. When you see weird berms being built in all of the parks, that's part of their effort to allow the river to change levels safely. When you see these weirs, that's also part of trying to make the river drain a little bit more predictably. And yeah, that's really all I've got. It was super fun to meet Rick. I had never been that far west before, so it was fun to see that there's an entire other city out in the West End as well, and I'll definitely be going back to check out a few more things that I did not quite get to tick off here. And Rick in particular helped me a lot, just telling me about the history of the area, and also really made me feel like an amateur at sleuthing through the Toronto archives. One thing that he did find for me is actually how we're going to kick off next week's video when we talk about the old Sunnyside Park. And yeah, Rick managed to find a perfect map that shows everything, even where I'm not even going to elaborate. Stick around for that next week. Have a beautiful day.